Do you remember that old joke about the Zen Buddhist that goes up to the hot dog vendor and says, "Make me one with everything"? That's probably a joke that originated right here in Chicago, where the hot dog has been elevated to the level of Zen-like perfection. Now, one with everything here means that classic Chicago dog that has mustard and relish, onions and tomatoes, sport peppers, dill pickle, and a sprinkling of celery salt. Taken one by one, none of those simple flavors really has a lot to do with Chicago. But you pile them all on a steaming poppy seed bun and we have created something unmistakable. You could call this an edible icon that just captures the very essence of the place. I mean, think about New Orleans with those poor boy sandwiches, fried oysters in them. Or what about Philadelphia with the cheese steak and the grilled onions? Or in Mexico? One with everything might just take the form of a torta. Now, I don't mean a tort or a cake here, as the name might suggest. I'm talking about one of these. Yeah, a sandwich. But a distinctly Mexican sandwich, and together with the taco, it's become one of Mexico's best-loved street foods. It's a crusty roll that's hollowed out and filled with beans and meat and cheese, salsa, avocado, white, you name it. But what's a sandwich got to do with Mexican culture, or bread for that matter? I mean, hasn't the corn tortilla been Mexico's daily bread since time immemorial? Yeah, it has. But today, so is bread like this. Now, you see, it all started when the Spaniards brought wheat to Mexico, and with it the whole tradition of making wheat flour breads. And then back in 1864, Napoleon III, the Emperor of France, he dispatched the Habsburg Emperor Maximilian to rule Mexico. And Maximilian and Carlotta, his wife, wouldn't leave their home without their French bakers in tow, and that meant baguettes here in Mexico. And then soon after, crusty rolls like this caught on, and naturally, as you could imagine, people thought up ways of filling these old world breads with new world flavors. And then shortly thereafter, the torta compuesta, the composed sandwich, was born, like the ones that they make here. This place is a little like a Lower East Side deli gone south. I mean, way south. Just check out all this variety. Now, making a good torta starts with good bread, and you've got really two choices. Some people prefer this one. It's the three-humped, sort of flat, crusty bread that's called a telera. Other people prefer the bolillo, which is rounder, split on the top, and equally as crusty. And when it comes to the fillings, it could be roast pork or beef or turkey. You know, in some places in Mexico, they make these wonderful Serrano-style hams like in Perote, Veracruz. You know, one time when I was down on the coast, I had an incredibly good torta of simmered bacalao. That's the salt cod with tomatoes and roasted green chilies. But there's one thing that all those tortas had in common, and that was beans. A smear of mashed beans over the bottom of the bread. Maybe the way that we would use mayonnaise. And you know, there's a really fast and simple way to make those mashed Mexican beans, and that's to start off with some onions and garlic simmering in a little oil in a pan. Then open a can of beans. I'm using these kidney beans here. Tip off the liquid, and then just pour them right in on your cooked onions and garlic. Hey, Lainey, could you help me with this for a minute? Okay, I'm just gonna pour the beans in there. Now, will you mash them? Let me get them all in there. Will you mash those all there for me? Now, the bread is the most critical part of the torta, of course, and you might not live where you could get a good bolillo or telera, but you probably can get one of these. This is a baguette, and you can find pretty good crispy ones all over the United States. Just cut out a chunk of it like that and hollow it out just the way that you would a bolillo. I live around the corner from a Mexican grocery, so I bought some of these bolillos, and that's what I'm gonna use. The first thing you gotta do is to cut the bread in half. scoop out the soft bread that's on the inside. Hey, Lenny, can I borrow a few of your mashed beans there? I know you're not quite done with it, but I wanted to scoop out a few of them. Those are pretty good. And spread those right across the bottom of the bread. Now a piece of pork can go on to that.
Wow, the smashing is kind of hard.
Wow, oh, some avocado, that sounds great to me. I'm just gonna scoop it out. Maybe you've seen some of the guides in the torta places in Mexico just scoop out avocado like that and put it right on top of their sandwiches. A piece of this queso fresco, this is that fresh Mexican eating cheese, a few pickled jalapeno strips over the top of it. And then on the top of the bread, I'm gonna spoon some beautiful roasted tomato salsa, like salsa de molcajete. Now that makes me hungry. Okay, so that goes on there. If you're hungry, tell me what kind of torta that you're hungry for, because I was thinking we'd wrap these up and take them to a soccer game, or maybe some other kind of game. Here in the valley of Oaxaca in Mexico, they play this modern-day descendant of the pre-Hispanic ball game. They call it pelota mixteca. Now, it's played with 5 players on a side, and each one of them has a lead-studded glove. Those things can weigh as much as 12 pounds, and they use them to hit the ball. Now, when the ball hits the ground in your opponent's territory, that's when you score. Sort of like volleyball. It's an intense sport to watch, and here in Oaxaca, what's even more intense is the passion with which it's played. It's sort of like soccer in other parts of Mexico. Now, this ancient ball court here in Monte Alban is the place that they played this game that gave birth to the pelota mixteca. That game is being played right now just down below us in the valley. And it's an example of the kinds of ball courts that are found all over Mesoamerica. But in this place, some 1,200 years ago, the Zapotecs were playing the game. Now, this is an eye-shaped ball court, and it has this stone right here in the middle of it. Now, the game would start with this crude rubber ball that would be served off of this stone, and then all of the players had to keep that ball in motion using only their shoulders and their hips. Thought soccer was a hard game to play, and they would bounce it back and forth off of these inclines, which would have been stuccoed over, with the object of getting the ball into their opponent's far end. No, we don't know exactly what all the rules and the regulations of that game were, but we do know that it was more than just a sport. In fact, it was a sort of dramatic representation of the struggle between good and evil and truth and falsehood. And the group or the person that won represented good and had the truth. Now, there's this wonderful story that involves a ball game. It starts off with a comet, a particularly dramatic comet in the sky. And Moctezuma, that last great emperor of the Aztecs, he disagrees with the ruler of Texcoco about what this comet means. So they have a face-off, a one-on-one game in a ball court. Well, the ruler of Texcoco won, confirming his interpretation, which was that that comet meant the demise of the Aztec Empire. And just a few years later, the Spaniards arrived here. So what about the folks that were watching those ancient games? Well, they were likely aristocrats, and they were collected up here on top of those inclines. And no doubt they were cheering wildly and perhaps even munching on something. So I've just got to ask, what was the hot dog of the moment? Well, we could be certain that it wasn't one of these. You see, bread didn't even come here until much, much later. But chances are it did have something to do with this. The ancient flatbread of the Americas that is thought to have originated right here in the central highlands of Mexico at the beginning of the classical period, which is sometime between 300 and 900 AD. You see, that's when the folks in the kitchen discovered that if they boiled their corn with calcium hydroxide, that they could dissolve the outer hull of the corn and actually make it a little more nourishing. But they also made another great discovery, and that was that same corn could be ground into a smooth paste that they could pat out and then bake on their clay griddles. And before long, that elemental flatbread became the portable, sturdy, nourishing staple of Mesoamerica. Now, when the Spaniards came here, they likely heard that flatbread being called something like tlaxcali. I think that probably proved a little bit too challenging for them, and so they rechristened it the tortilla. So if in Spanish torta means cake, then tortilla means
little cakes.
2 points. It's impossible to imagine Mexican cuisine without corn tortillas. Today, they're mostly factory-made corn tortillas that are rolled between dies and then baked on conveyor belts, but they still have to be eaten fresh. I mean, almost every Mexican household buys fresh tortillas at least once a day from their local tortilleria. That's what they call the little tortilla factories. You know that in Mexico City alone, there's over 15,000 of those little tortilla factories? Well, if you've got a tortilla factory in your town, and there probably will be if there's any sizable Mexican population at all, well, by all means go there and buy some fresh corn tortillas. Or maybe you want to buy some of that fresh ground corn masa so that you can try your hand at pressing them out and baking them. I mean, that's when the real moment of tortilla revelation comes. When you can just sink your teeth into a fresh one, just moments off the griddle. It'll be soft and supple and perfumed with that seductive aroma of corn and earth. So when we opened our restaurants, Frontera Grill and Topolobampo, well, we knew that we wanted to give people that revelatory tortilla experience. And what that's turned out to mean is that we've got 3 tortilla cooks who turn out thousands of fresh-baked tortillas every day. Now, they start with fresh ground corn masa that's delivered to us every morning and then knead in just the right amount of water to give it a soft consistency, not sticky at all. And then they grab a nugget of it, about the size of a golf ball, and press it out in a cast iron tortilla press between 2 sheets of plastic. Peel off the top, then unmold it from the bottom sheet of plastic, lay it on a hot griddle, and after about 30 seconds or so, it'll release itself from the griddle. Then flip it over, let it brown underneath. That'll take 45 seconds to a minute, and then flip it again. That's when the magic happens. That's when it starts to balloon up like a little piece of pita bread. After, say, 45 seconds more or so, when it's browned underneath, then they all get collected together. And I just figured out that we've made 5 million tortillas on that little griddle. If you stack those one on top of another, it would be a stack that's 5 miles high. And right on the top of the stack would be these ones that I just brought home from the restaurant. And you know what I'm gonna make to go with them? You guessed it, tortas. But not the sandwich kind. No, I've got a taste right now for tortas de lentejas. Okay, so if tortas the sandwich kind are sort of like the Chicago-style hot dog of Mexico, then tortas de lentejas are sort of like the burgers, the veggie burgers, because you see, they're made from these lentils, lentejas, the sort of ordinary grocery store variety of lentils that you find sold right next to the split peas. Spaniards brought them to Mexico back in the 16th century, and they were adopted right away. And the first step to the preparation of our lentils is simply to simmer them in boiling water. Just gonna pour them all right in there. I wanna add a spoonful of salt for seasoning. After about 35 minutes or so, they'll be completely tender and just beginning to fall apart. Just take a look at the cooled lentils that I've drained and put out here. They should be cooked enough that you can actually press them together and they'll hold. Now to that, I'm going to add a little sweet flavor of sauteed onions and garlic. That'll be wonderful up against the earthiness of those lentils. Sprinkle on a little bit of fresh ground pepper, and now 2 ingredients that are going to give us that great Mexican flavor. One of them is queso añejo. Queso añejo is like that wonderful garnishing cheese or crumbling cheese that you find in Mexico. It crumbles in your hands like that. Think of it sort of like Parmesan or Romano. Got some of it crumbled there that I'm going to scoop right on top of my lentil mixture. A little bit of chopped cilantro over the top of all of that, and then just work it all together. And now's the time to form those little cakes. And I'm going to do it in a 1/4 cup measure. Just take a little bit of our mixture and put it into a 1/4 cup measure. Pack it moderately tight, not too hard. And then I'm going to unmold that right into the palm of my hand, and then put it onto a baking sheet that's lined with aluminum foil. After I've made all of this lentil mixture into the little cakes, I'm gonna slide them into the freezer and let them firm for about ½ an hour for easy breading. With a couple of eggs in a pie dish, beat those with a little salt and a touch of milk or water. You want it to be very, very smooth. Beat it that long. And then the breading procedure starts by placing one of the little frozen or partially frozen cakes in the egg mixture and then transferring it over to some breadcrumbs. I love those really coarse crumbs, the ones that the Japanese style crumbs that they call panko flakes. Make sure that you get an even coating all the way around, pat it nicely, and then transfer that back to its baking sheet. Now, once all of them have been coated, then it's really best to put them back in the refrigerator for about ½ an hour for that exterior coating to really adhere well. When the little cakes are browned on both sides, they're ready to serve. Just a nice little salad, simple, fresh, maybe some salsa to spoon on the plate to go with these crusty little cakes. That's all you really need. Put a couple of them on the top of it there. And you've got an all vegetable meal that's right for, well, any time of year. Which reminds me, these aren't just some sort of new-aged burger alternative that I dreamed up. No, the tortas de lentejas are actually a time-honored dish that grew out of the tradition of Lent. Or La Vigilia, as they say here in Spanish in Mexico, the 40 days between Ash Wednesday and Easter Sunday, a time when the consumption of meat is forbidden. Now, the Catholic Church may have originally come up with this prohibition as a form of penance or privation, but here in Mexico, all the holidays and festivals are around food. They weren't about to let a little prohibition of the consumption of meat get in their way. In fact, since Christianity has come to Mexico, an extensive Lenten cuisine has evolved. You know, this little booklet here catalogs more than 100 different Lenten dishes, from soups to salads, entrees. Some of the most famous ones are the caldo de habas, the fava bean soup, and then, of course, the most famous is tortillas de camarón con romeritos. It's greens and potatoes and nopal cactus, all simmered in a beautiful, simple mole with little shrimp cakes. Now, those shrimp cakes actually look like little meat patties, which is the point of a lot of vegetarian cuisine, it seems to me, all over the world. The Zen tradition, even, of Chinese cooking has a vegetarian dish called vegetarian goose, which is made out of bean curd. A little closer to home, we've got those meatless hamburgers in the grocery stores and health food restaurants. And of course, that brings us back to the original veggie burger, the tortas de lentejas, the lentil cakes. Well, lentils are such a big part of Lent that I figured that those two words must have something to do with each other. But guess what? They don't. In fact, the word for Lent apparently comes from the Middle English word for springtime, and the word lentil, some of the scholars think, comes from the Latin word for lentus, which is slow. because they thought eating too many lentils would actually make your brain slow. I certainly disagree with that. But what everybody does agree about is the fact that the lentil gave its name to one of the greatest inventions of mankind, which it actually resembles, something that the Romans called the lens. So what would be the great way to finish off a great torta meal? I think with a very nice slice of torta. You see, in addition to being a Lenten veggie burger and a great sandwich, well, the word torta can also refer to a cake, a kind of special cake. The kind of thing that you would find in an old world tea salon like this one right here in the heart of Mexico. And for that, we have to thank the old fellow Maximilian, who reigned over Mexico back in the 1860s. Now you see, besides bringing fancy European-style cakes along with those baguettes, he also left behind a sort of burgeoning middle class, and they got used to going out and hanging in places like restaurants and cafes. And here 150 years later, those places are still thriving, and they're offering treats to all comers, or as Maximilian might say, let them eat cake. But this ain't no ordinary cake. We've got a whole variety of old world style cakes made with some new world ingredients. This, for instance, is a roll that's made with pecans, and on the inside of it, that's cajeta, Mexico's classic goat milk caramel. Now this one does look more straight ahead European. That's a charlotte filled with beautiful fresh strawberries. And there are jam-filled pinwheels around a Bavarian cream scented with Mexican vanilla. A beautiful mocha torte, and this one for all the world looks like the classic Black Forest torte. Okay, here's the thing. When you order a torta in Mexico, you just really don't know what to expect. I mean, you might be getting the tastiest little sandwich you ever put in your mouth, or it might be a crusty veggie cake, or a classy dessert like this one. But hey, that's Mexico. You scratch the surface of any word, any dish, any torta, and you might just come up with something surprising and sensational.